Hi everyone and welcome to my new video. It's about the new NSPersistentCloudKit container. And this is the second video in my series Becoming a CloudKit Expert. It's not the second video that I originally planned, but yeah, Apple introduced that new thing at their WWDC, so I decided to share a few thoughts with you. So let's get started. First of all, I just want to give you a brief overview what the new API offers, and then I list a few advantages and disadvantages. So as I already said, Apple introduced the NSPersistentCloudKitContainer at the Worldwide Developer Conference this year. And to explain you what it does, I would like to start with a very common scenario. So we have a device on the left and the server on the right, and now let's say we have an application where we can store nodes. So we create a new node and we upload it to the iCloud so that it's stored on the server. And now let's say we close our application, we open it again, and then we fetch the data from the server so we can see our nodes. And for this mechanism, we have CloudKit. So CloudKit is an API to provide the possibility to pull data from the iCloud and to push data into the iCloud. Now, maybe that workflow is doable if we have an application that stores nodes. But what happens if we have an application that stores photos or something else with a larger file size? Then this workflow is kind of problematic because we do not really want to fetch that huge amount of data every time we open the application. Instead, we want to store it locally in addition to the server. So we want to cache the data in a local database. Let's say we use CoreData for this purpose. And now we do not fetch all the data every time we open the application. We just fetch the changes. So now let's say we have added a new photo using a different device, but the same iCloud account, of course. And now we open the app again, and only the changes, so this time the new photo, will be downloaded from the iCloud server. And now we have a situation that might be problematic, because now we want to store that new change in our local database. And this is where we could have merge conflicts, because we have two different states of our data. We have the database locally on our device, and we have the data in our iCloud. So we have two different states, and we need to define which goes first. We need to define how we handle merge conflicts. So that might end in difficult situations. But in general, that is the normal, usual workflow if you want to use the iCloud and a local database to cache the data. And now is when the NSPersistentCloudKitContainer comes into play. Because what this class does for us is it takes all that synchronization stuff from us and handles it completely automatically in the background. So in this screen you can see the CloudKit logo is a bit faded out, and that's because we do not work with CloudKit anymore. We do only work with our local database with CoreData. So from our perspective, it seems like if we were only storing our data locally in our CoreData storage, and all the synchronization, all the uploading, everything is done by iOS automatically and in the background. So first of all, that sounds, of course, well, fantastic, because that takes so much work from us. So there are a couple of advantages. So that's obvious. We do not need to write CloudKit code anymore, and that's fantastic, because I don't know if you've already worked with CloudKit before, but if you use CloudKit, there are a lot of asynchronous functions. There's a lot of error handling. You need to handle the incoming notifications if changes occur on the server, to store what status or what state your database is locally. You need to work with tokens. So there's so much to do, and yeah, now you do not have to worry about that anymore. The synchronization is done completely automatically. From our perspective, as already mentioned before, we only work with CoreData. So as I said, we don't need to worry about notifications, not about merge conflicts and so on. And in general, that leads to less errors, because it's way less error prone. Since we do not have to work with asynchronous function anymore, we do not have to cover all these error cases and so on. So that's a huge advantage. Now to explain the second major advantage, I think I have to explain the current situation first. So right now we have a limitation of references if we use CloudKit, and that's something that most developers do not know. But right now we have a hard limitation. So a CloudKit record cannot have more than 750 references. And that's kind of funny, because Apple solved that limitation by using their NSPersistentCloudKitContainer. And how did they do it? They did it this way. They do not use the native references of CloudKit. Instead, they're simply using a kind of foreign key, because they say, okay, all these server-based fetch requests are extremely cheap. So this way it's better, then we do not have the reference limitations anymore. And that's also necessary, because otherwise we couldn't use existing CoreData databases, since they usually do have more than 750 relationships. So yeah, that's a very cool side effect. So many of these advantages also come with disadvantages. So first of all, I said what's cool is that we just need to focus on CoreData locally. That's also a disadvantage, of course, because that means that we can only work with CoreData. But that's kind of obvious, because I don't know if you've worked with CoreData before. If so, then you probably are familiar with the NSPersistentContainer. This is a class that kind of encapsulates the whole CoreData stack for you. And the NSPersistentCloudKitContainer is a subclass of that class, which inherits all the functionality, and in addition to that, adds the functionality of synchronizing your data with the iCloud. So I wouldn't really call that a disadvantage, but it's something that you definitely should know, of course. The next advantage was that it doesn't use native CloudKit references, which was an advantage, because this way we do not have the reference limitation anymore. But it's also a disadvantage, because it is one of the main reasons why sharing is very difficult using the NSPersistentCloudKitContainer. Now, for sharing, there are two main problems, I would say. The first one is, to share a record, we need to access the record. So on CloudKit, we have CK records, and we need to access that CK record and create a CK share out of it. Now we can even solve that problem, because Apple provides an API where we can access the CK record that is created automatically for a specific CoreData entity. So we could solve that problem. But the next problem, and that's the one with the native references, or with the non-usage of native references, is that you need the references the native references to share multiple records at once. So to explain that, I would like to give you an example. Let's say we have photo albums, which is a record, and in these photo albums, of course, we have photos, and these photos are records as well. And now let's say we want to share these, or we want to share a specific photo album, and of course with all photos inside of the album. And how we do that is that we create a parent reference in each photo pointing to the photo album record. And now when we share the photo album record, what CloudKit does for us, it automatically shares all its, I would call them child records as well. And that's of course exactly what we want. Now that's the current usual workflow, but of course that does not work anymore because Apple does not use the native CloudKit references in their NSPersistentCloudKitContainer. So right now I would say it's really difficult to use the sharing functionality with the new API, and in my eyes this is one of the major disadvantages right now. I really would love to see Apple improving that and to providing that functionality as well in the future. Another rather small disadvantage is that we cannot use CK-user. That's a record type representing a iCloud user. Can be yourself, can be a friend. Can be sometimes quite helpful. But of course, since we do not work with CloudKit itself, we work with CoreData, and CoreData does not provide that class. We can also not use it. And one last thing is that we need to, or first of all, if we use the new NSPersistentCloudKitContainer on an existing project that uses CoreData, we might need to slightly modify the existing CoreData scheme, because due to some technical reasons, all attributes of the entities need to be optional, or at least provide a default value, or and. So yeah, these are the main disadvantages that I noticed. Maybe you've seen others. If so, feel free to comment them. I also just played around a bit to see how it works, if it works, and I was quite impressed. I think it's really cool. So the final question is, should I use it or not? I would say, and that's my personal opinion of course, I would say yes, you should definitely give it a try if you have a smaller project where you want to use iCloud mainly for backups or to synchronize your data across your own devices or across the devices of a certain user, and you do not want to share that data, and your data model is not too complex, then I would say that it looks like a really promising approach, and I think it's really worth a try, because it takes so much work from you and so much code, and it's so much, I would say it's way less error prone, so I would definitely give it a try. In contrast to that, if you use iCloud also with the purpose of sharing data with others, then I would rather not use it right now, because it's clearly not provided that functionality. And also, if your data model is very complex, or if you want to provide custom caching or other behaviors, I would also not use it right now. So of course, the NSPers, you know what I mean. It takes a lot of work from you, but of course that also means that you lose your control. So that's always a trade-off. So in general, my first impression was quite good. I think it's a great new thing with limitations in its functionality right now. And I would love to hear your opinion. So if you've already tried it out, feel free to comment what you think about it, or also in general, what you would prefer to see videos about in the future, and whatever comes in your mind right now. So if you like the video, I would love to hear feedback or to see some thumbs up. And there will come a lot of more new videos in the future about CloudKit. So if you want to see them, feel free to subscribe. I would appreciate that. So that was my advertising, but let's stop that. Have a nice day and thanks for watching. See ya.